After our long Advent journey, we finally reached the last few days. Christmas Eve is the day after tomorrow, and yet we are not quite there yet. And today's scripture passages draw our attention once again to the twin purposes of this Advent season. Preparing to celebrate once again Jesus' incarnation and birth, and to eagerly anticipate his coming again at the end of time. We are to remain aware of that second point of emphasis, even during the Christmas season, because without Jesus' death, resurrection, and return, Christmas loses its meaning. So on this final Sunday, what are we invited to reconsider? Our selection from Psalm 80 begs the Father, "May your help be with the Son of Man, whom yourself made strong. Then we no more withdraw from you. Give us new life, and we will call upon your name," says the psalmist. Psalm 80 is a lament of a forlorn but not despairing, conquered people who still turn their gaze toward the God of gods, the Lord of lords, who is worthy of all trust, even when things look bleak and hopeless. This song of trust is appropriate to our own lips, too, amid the turmoil of war, persecutions, and environmental catastrophes around us. Lord, make us turn to you. Let us see your face, and we shall be saved. We just sang together. We know that God has a plan, a good plan, a perfect plan, a plan that has existed from the beginning of time. And the first reading in every Mass since the beginning of Advent has been taken from the Old Testament prophets. This morning, we heard from Micah, a contemporary of Isaiah who wrote the words God gave to him some 700 years before the birth of Christ. His words had a message for that day. A leader would arise from the house of David, who would lead and guide the Jewish people back to their homeland following their conquest and exile. Hold firm and don't lose hope, he seems to be saying. But there's more to it than that, as we all know so well. Another shoot from the tribe of Judah would be born in Bethlehem, the hometown of King David's line, who would be a leader and guide like no other, the Anointed One, the Messiah, the Christ. All those titles mean the same thing. Who would save his people and us. Our gospel anticipates that birth. This passage encapsulates the entire Advent message. Each time I pray the Annunciation of the Rosary's joyful mysteries, I'm astonished once again. Here's why. First, I am amazed that one of the first things our Blessed Mother does when she finds herself pregnant is to walk 70-some miles from Nazareth to the hill country near Jerusalem. I like to walk. I gotta keep my old body moving or it'll quit moving. So I walk maybe 5 or 6 miles at a time, maybe 4 or 5 times a week. But I tell you, I'd have to be seriously motivated to walk 70 miles. Mary was. Why? Could it be she just had to share the good news with another who herself was experiencing a miraculous pregnancy? Or was Mary driven out of concern to help her elderly relative? We don't know for sure whether it was a combination or something else entirely. But we do see the hand of God in Our Lady's reaction. Second, what prompted Elizabeth to make her own declaration? Blessed are you among women. And why? And she says, how does this happen to me, that the mother of my Lord should come to me? And why, for that matter, does John leap in Elizabeth's womb? All are more signs of God's presence. Yes, the Advent focus of Jesus' birth is clearly illustrated in today's passage, but so is the second, his mission. Jesus, still in the womb, the Lord reaches out to his cousin. Just his unborn presence brings the people around him to a new perspective and understanding. He was preaching. His sermon was silent, but those who heard the message that resonated with the needs of their hearts responded. Our reading from Hebrews perhaps seems a bit confusing since, after all, didn't God command animal sacrifices for atonement and worship? And yet our second reading seems to disparage them. God did indeed mandate sacrifices as part of that ancient liturgy. But we see illustrated too throughout Old Testament texts that the most important feature of those sacrifices was the worshiper's disposition, his or her humble and contrite heart. Hebrews tells us that God the Father didn't demand Jesus sacrifice himself to appease the Father's anger. Rather, Jesus offered out of love to atone for the sins of the people from that day down to our own. He offered to give something of the highest possible value, his blameless and sinless life, as an offering out of love and justice on our behalf. Each time we read Scripture or hear it proclaimed, we ought to be different from the experience. We ought to grow, to change for the better. So what lessons do the readings of this morning hold for us? Our hearts, like those of all feeling and insightful people, yearn to see God's face, to be saved, as our psalm articulates for us. And Jesus gives us an example. Everything that Jesus says and does in sacred scripture is a lesson for us. He quotes Psalm 40 in our reading from the Hebrews. Behold, I come to do your will, O God. And likewise, our Blessed Mother and Elizabeth, who opened their hearts to welcome God's love and direction to a purpose-filled life of joy, despite the trials and challenges in their world. May Elizabeth's words to Mary also apply to us. Blessed are we blessed are we who believe that what was spoken to us by the Lord would be fulfilled. In only a minute or two, each of us will say, "I believe," as we recite the creed together. Let's say it with the conviction that we feel and be witnesses to those among us who may still be uncertain. And let's let those two words, "I believe," guide our actions in the coming hours until we once again celebrate the birth of the one who speaks to the needs of our hearts.